And here we are live, and we'll see if this is working. Now the blinds are messed up, the lighting's not right. See, it's just a total travesty. Well, that doesn't matter. I still have the glare of the sun on me. But just leave it. Leave it.
Just gonna fix it.
Just leave it. And
You know
nobody's
what?
here.
That's not right. It is live, but that's not the chat. I know what happened. Hold on. Give me a second.
Okay, I can't see what anybody's saying because there's the chat.
Pop out chat.
Now Trevor's putting the right chat up
There you go.
because Trevor had the wrong chat up.
Now it should be there.
I am in my favorite mountain, Papago Park, the backside of the park. We're actually going to have a Don's picnic out there.
There you go. I'm gonna go finish eating dinner.
Okay. We're going to have a Don's picnic out there. Trevor's waving as he leaves.
Well, people said hello.
Okay.
Said Trevor.
Did someone even say hello to
Eating
Trevor?
dinner.
I don't think anybody said hello. Oh, somebody said Trevor. Yeah, well, he's gone. He's eating. New intro. Well, no. So I told Trevor I have always wanted a countdown before we hit the intro. And so today I made him put one together. Told him we always, there's all this controls and stuff I have up here. And because of that, I wanted to utilize some of those. And I told him it'd be cool to have a countdown before the intro, which gives me time when we're getting ready to set up. So, what's up, Wayne? Trevor, stop any. Well, that was. Yeah, Trevor was mainly here because for several weeks we have not had this. It's not worked properly. He's long gone, Robert. But Trevor kept saying he fixed it, but he didn't fix it to where it works like it used to work. He fixed it so it works differently than it used to. No, there's no intro music. No, well, it's not. Yeah, it's. I wanted a countdown so I could see the countdown in and follow it, because when it goes live, there's a delay. So to make sure I'm live, I catch halfway through the live, I'm getting the feed. So the problem becomes I don't have enough time to know if it really is live or not. So I guess you understand that. So I'm trying to check, and I have very little time to be sure, and I hate, of course, talking about it like now when we're live that, hey, we're going to be live. So it was a countdown to add another 20-30 seconds. So I said they'd be cool to have a countdown, and a bunch of podcasts and stuff do them. So I said it'd be cool to have a countdown with little clips and stuff. And he was like, oh. And I said, we got all this fancy stuff. I said, we don't use it, so let's use it. So now we have an intro and a countdown and a black screen and a live screen. But there's all this other stuff I'm telling him. And it's been a process. It's been the last year I've been telling him, well, let's just put that stuff in there. So new intros come probably next week, even though he's not really done much during his vacation. Even though I think he's still on vacation next week. But usually for the new year, he always changes things up. So if we're going to have something completely new, that's when it would be. And so today we were working on the countdown, and then I wanted him to work on a couple other things, and then I was putting some music for him to see what he thought and see what he would thought of using that for something. So that was the whole thing. So that was the long way around it. So there we are. So we got here. It's working this way. And we are in live. So Merry Christmas, everybody. Hope everybody had a good Christmas. And mine was fine because I got to sleep in. I watched football all day, and then I ate steak, and then I slept. So that was pretty much Christmas wrapped up in a bow for me. Steak, football, and sleeping in. New intro to the intro. Kinda. Okay. So, anyhow, so that's that. So we're back up to speed on that, back up to speed on this. Just curious. Did you know Jack put me in his book? He put everybody in his books. I hate to say this, but I think I'm in a couple of his books. I found myself in Frank. I know I'm in one book because when he got the Treasure Hunter Year Award, I'm in the picture, so I'm in that book. And I think I got thank you'd in one or two of the books. I don't know. I don't know because I don't know which book's which. Because he has Finding Lost El Dorado, Searching for a Lost El Dorado, Treasure Trails of the Superstitions. He has, and I think Treasure Trails of the Superstitions. One of them he did like in a spiral bound book, and then he did a normal book, but I think it's the same book, but it's a little different. So it's confusing which book's which. So, Treasures of a Cursed Mountain. I'm trying to, I don't know. Like I said. Well, anyways, there you go. Yes, I hadn't. Yeah, there was I don't know which book it is. I'll have to look sometime. But yeah, one book I was reading, and then I found myself in it, and then I was thanked in a book, and then I saw my picture in a book, and this, and then I saw pictures that I took in a book. And I was like, huh? So usually you don't ask, or if they ask, I don't really care. So it just happens. So there you go. Did you get in the, yeah, I have to look for you in the credits then. Because, yeah, he did a who's who of thank yous. And I just ran into one of them just not too long ago. Anyways, but I did this week speak to Bob Shoes and Ron Feldman and talked to Frank. You actually talked to Frank. Frank was available. So I talked to Frank, and he's doing fine. And then I spent a day with Greg Davis, and we picked up a bunch of stuff, and there we go. It's just a little book, a little paperback, just in case he made it from the Rendezvous. I don't know. I got tons of stuff. When we film Chasing Legends, you'll see there's a little stack of books next to me to the right. I don't know if it shows up on screen. Or, well, yeah, when we do Chasing Legends on Mondays. That stack is 2 stacks, and it goes all the way to the floor. And that's piles of stuff. And there's a lot of books in it because the bookshelves are kind of crazy. So I don't know what's all up there. Hey, Dallas, how's it going? So, yeah, there's a lot of books here, and Jack's books are separated. I know he's coming out with his ghost book, his book on ghosts. He did the police book, right? The one about policemen, and now he's doing the one on ghosts. I know that. I don't have the one on the policemen that Frank contributed to. Either Frank contributed to it, or Jack used Frank's story. Don't know. Speaking of books, and when people say, when are you going to write a book? I learned a valuable lesson this week. Thomas Glover, his estate, which is right now, the state of Arizona has a conservatorship. Is that what it is? And because of that, the museum got a bunch of his stuff and all. I transported, God, I'd have to add it up, but it was, I believe it was 25 boxes times 40. So it was approximately about 1,000 books. And I got another 1,000. So, because after that 1,000, they found, I didn't even know that Thomas had a basement, and he had a basement. And there was another 1,000 books or so in his basement. They're all the same book. The Treasure Tales. Jack Sanfelice has a book called The Treasure Trails. Thomas. And Jack had a weird thing of repeating what other people did. And I'll have to check on that, but it was Treasure Tales of the Superstition Mountains is Thomas Glover's. It's unavailable, except that I have right now. We got rid of about 1,000. If you were at the rendezvous and you came down, I had boxes of them and I gave them away to people. That was part of that first group, and then now I have another 600 or 700 sitting here that I've been handing out and getting rid of. So the character is a mixture of me and Dallas. Shout out to Dallas. Okay, oh, it's a character. Okay. So, but yeah, there was that weird thing of Tom Collenborn was writing Cowboys of the Superstitions, and then Jack hurried up and put a book out called Superstition Cowboys. Just weird stuff that would happen. And so, yeah, Treasure Tales of the Superstition Mountains is Thomas Glover. Treasure Trails of the Superstition Mountains is Jack Sanfelice. Two entirely separate books. Anyways, Treasure Tales, yeah, I have those in the manuscripts, and there's sitting, and so I almost felt like going out on Christmas morning and handing them to people who drove by in books or in cars and trucks, but there wasn't that many people. But I have given a bunch away, and I will continue to do so. Like I said, make sure they're dispersed. At least they get read by people who might care. As Robert said earlier, shits and giggles. Yeah, make sure everybody has a book. It was an alright book. I think one of the problems with, and it's not meant to be mean-spirited on anyone, but unfortunately, when someone is writing a book, they become repetitive in trying to tell the same tale or differently or different way. Jack's When Silver Was King, I really liked. It was very different than everyone else's, and he kind of went for his own thing, wrapped in the Dutchman and wrapped in the two soldiers a bit and some various stories. Could have used a really good editor, which I think today, if you got a really good editor to go in and cut that thing up and fix some of it, it would be a really, really good book. He put a lot of time and effort into that. And then the rest of them kind of are very similar, and I say that I kind of, that was why Tom was very cautious and careful with his books. How many books did Tom Collenborn publish? Other than, okay, he did Ride Through Time, and then he did the next one, which was they were the Superstition Mountains. So one was Ride Through Time. I can't remember what the other one was, but there one has like a photograph cover. And those two, he did Act of Justice, which is a novel. He did Circle Stone with Jim Swanson. The History of Apache Junction. He did History of Apache Trail, or Travel Down Apache Trail. He did Echoes of Lost Legends, which is, I think, like a poem one. It's like a poem or something. It's very short. Then he did Legend of the Superstition Mountains, where our show title came from, which was a shorter book. And I think that might be it. Oh, he did the Chronological History of the Superstition Mountains. And I know he had a couple more. He didn't release them as he wrote them, so I know there was a Cowboys of the Superstitions book that he had completed. He never released. I don't know what else there might have been. That might have been about it, because he did newspaper articles as well. Did the Collenborn Chronicles and all that, and then he did the single with I know his name's Jay, and it'll come to me eventually, but Jay Mitchell. So they did those songs for that 45 RPM they wrote, and that might have been all his published works. I don't know if he co-contributed or contributed to anything else. So, and I got that all kind of twisted and mixed around, but they're very hard to come by. I think most of his book rights he sold before he died, so I'm sure someone publishes them and they should be available here and there. I don't know, and it could be a little confusing. Tom jointly wrote a number of some books with Jim Swanson, and Jim Swanson's rights, I think, went to the museum, but I think that Tom's rights went somewhere else with someone else, so I don't know if they have to have an agreement or something or how that works. I really don't know. So, so there's that, which is kind of all right. I'm just kind of looking over at all the pile of books now that I mentioned the pile of books, and I realize how many books I got. They've all been read. They're just piled there because I'm trying to figure out the canon that goes on the bookshelves and then the other things, because there's a lot of copies. Ride Through Time, I got about 6 or 7 copies. Coronado's Children's, multiple copies, things like that. Ride Through Time, if you live here locally, should be available. And I've always worked on the fact, because I know Tortilla Flat had them. I know the Superstition Mountain Museum does, but they don't have online stores. And I was told by the current manager of the museum, and this falls where it may, that Dutch hunters don't buy books. And people into the Lost Dutchman don't buy books from the museum. They would if they were on the bookshelf, and they definitely would if they were available online. And Greg Davis and I have tried to convince them otherwise. It's called the Superstition Mountain and Lost Dutchman Museum. You would think that would be a priority. But I know Ride Through Time was there. Last time I was there, Ride Through Time, Jesse's book, Ron's autobiography was there. I don't know if any San Felice's stuff was. I know San Felice had plenty left, but I don't know if he'd been through all his first runs or all through his runs of his books. They had only 1 or 2 copies of Jack Carlson, Elizabeth Stewart's books. So, but I know they were transitioning and changing the gift shop and stuff, so it could have been they just didn't have everything up at the time. I don't know. So it is hard to find things, except that everybody's go-to is Amazon, and then the local bookstores can be pricey if they're collectors. But again, and other people have said, you go locally to Goodwill's and you find some of them. So it's hard to say what you'll find where. If you're in the area of Apache Junction, you'll find more of them because they were sold, or Tom and everybody would write and do signings and stuff locally more often. So I am ready for a hike, please. Well, we're not. I will be out here soon, bunch, but yeah, so that it's coming. So, but yeah, everything intervened. The holidays are just, it's so messy, isn't it? Everybody's got to do so much. And then we're trying to get everything ramped up for the new year for this stuff. So, and then I'm talking to Trevor about other things. And it's just trying to wind everything up and all. I get most of my books from Abe Books and Thrift Books out online. See, yeah, and a lot of people do, and it's funny because there's a few places you get them, and if you get, there's a local, and local I mean pretty much in the Metro Phoenix area. If there's a bookstore that buys and sells used books and stuff, if you frequent it, one of the things you can do is tell the owners what you're interested in, and they will catch things. And I've done that, and that was where some of my collection 15, 20 years ago came from, because it was very difficult. Now, most of the older stuff I had already, so it's more of trying to keep up with who's releasing what, and then I hate without seeing it or reading it, but I do have my regrets after spending the money for it of purchasing books of people that release books, because they necessarily, I don't know, how do you put it? They're not very well written. It should cost you somewhere between $10 to $12 a copy to print the books. You should go with a decent publisher and so forth. But it's a vanity pressing. Sounds like a nasty word, but that's what it is. It's not running in the thousands. It's running maybe in the hundreds. But you want to have the best book possible. You don't have to be too fancy, because nobody will buy it, because it'll be too expensive for you for a resale. I don't know what the dogs are doing. I hear the feet slipping along on the thing. So the problem comes, you end up sometimes spending $30-$40 on a book that's just not very well done. So you have the book gallery, you have Bookman's. I mean, you never know where a book's going to turn up. So, but yes, the thrift stores in Apache Junction, those areas in East Phoenix, can turn up a lot of stuff. And I've here talked about some books I've found in very odd places where I found them. I was in Flagstaff once and found a first edition of Ride Through Time that was signed by Tom, and a bunch of other really good books. This has been a while back, but I found out like 5 or 6 really old first editions and stuff. A Sims Ely, I think, and a Thunder Guts Gold, just in Flagstaff. And I just happened to be going through this antique shop, and they had a little section of books. So I always look at the Arizona history section, and then just boom, 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 boom. I was like turning to Trevor going, oh my God, I wasn't going to spend anything, but now I'm going to spend a few dollars here, because man. So sometimes it's you hit a collection. But I've always picked them up and had multiple copies and different printed editions and so forth. But it's tough, because you got to go on Amazon and look things up. Jacob Lost Dutchman Mines, Superstition Mountains, and then go through and then find stuff. And then there's the local published authors. There are some authors that just, the only place you ever really seem to find their book is at the museum. So they must be friends of the museum. And then I find stuff there, but that's usually fictional works. And I would say, putting it nicely as possible, sorry, excuse me, stay away from the fictional stuff, because if you are really into the history, it's going to drive you nuts, because the people that do the fictional books don't geographically or anything stick with the story. So they do like check out Wikipedia briefly, and that's pretty much it. Write a definitive book about Adolf Ruth. That was one of the things I thought about, was not write a book, but compile all the material, because there's so many documents, newspaper articles, letters, so many things directly dealing with it that explain it. And if you put those together without opinion, it makes sense, I guess. Did someone leave? Because you came in here all hot and heavy. And I thought about that. I think, was it Gary Cundiff? I think Gary Cundiff put up a bunch of stuff online, which was similar in scope. And I thought, well, if it's online, which it is, well, everybody can look up a lot of that stuff. So I don't think it has the photographs and that stuff. But I thought about that once, and I talked to Thomas Glover about it. I said, that would be nice to have a standalone piece that kind of puts together that documentation, because there's so much of it, of the newspaper articles and follow-up and letters, and you get to see a lot of insight with how Erwin Ruth literally tells different versions of that same story. And I told him it would help people to understand where you see him say there was 2 maps, there was 3 maps, there was just 1 map, there was 2 maps. I never saw the maps really. I don't know if there was 2 or 3. And see where he told everyone something different. And we're talking about all kinds of people. So it creates kind of part of the problem, and the confusion is he wasn't sure. So he gives Glenn McGill maps, But then prior to that, and many, many times, and in letters I've seen that he wrote when his father's missing in the mountains, he states his father left the originals behind. Later he says, I have the tracings. Father took the originals with him. And he says, no, that changes later. So it's confusing. I think even the book itself, but people would see why there is confusion. And the fact that they sent the skull into town, and if you read or try to follow the Storyway authors, Jack Sanfelice, because Tom never really touches that story. Jack Sanfelice, Thomas Glover really talked about it. Jesse has his own take on it. If you look at how they tell it, you would never know that they found the skull, it came to Phoenix, that people actually looked at the skull, it was examined before it was released, that then Hausa sent it to Herdlicka, and then Herdlicka and all that drama began. There is a chain of custody, but people forget one of the problems was, and what created all this drama is, there never was a murder investigation. They weren't looking for anyone that killed him. They weren't sure what happened to him, and then they basically decided he died of natural causes. Because of that, nobody cared about a lot of it. So things came and went different ways. They didn't care about the maps at the time, really, and it was the newspaper reporters that kind of spun that. And then there was a Dutch hunter. I don't even know if I should call him a Dutch hunter, that said, oh no, they had files on all this stuff. And he wouldn't say which sheriff's department, all this. I checked with both. And there was a file at Maricopa County which doesn't really have anything in. But again, if there was a murder investigation, the files would still be there. They'd never release it because an unsolved murder is a cold case and they keep the files forever. The fact that that would have been a cold case murder investigation, the files would have never gone away. But then they were supposed to go blah, 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 blah. There was never... Just whatever was there was probably gone early on because nobody cared. He was missing. They pulled posses together. They went searching for him. And then once they found him, that was the end of the story. So, very different than what I think people expectation and stuff is. So yes, I talked to Thomas Glover about it. He thought it was a great idea. I wondered if he was going to do it. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And that means I have to pull those files down. That's a lot of files. That's a mother of several big, thick things of stuff because there's so much. And I'm still digging stuff up. There's still things I'm looking for on that. So that would be cool. Was Jim Bark alive? Yeah, he was. I think Bark died in the late 30s. 38, 39. Thinking. Yeah, probably around then. Yeah, I think he lived in California at that point, I believe. He had moved to California. But he was alive, and he was very close friends with Gus Barkley, Tex Barkley. So he was very aware of what happened. And that, again, it's like... I was talking with Greg, and I said, it's funny. They have photographs of, the skull and the expedition when they found the skull and when they looked for the body. And they have photographs of the search parties going out. And after they found the body, and all these photographs. We have one photograph when they're doing the search of that white sheet on the side of a mountain. There's no photographs of Roos Camp, of anything, of the search parties gathering anywhere. There's none of that for the papers. And I said, that's weird, because they were taking pictures of everything. And just the pictures we've seen are only a fraction of what was taken, obviously, at the time. Those are just the ones that were released, published. So I was talking to Greg. I said, plus, in the newspapers, when they'd show the search party areas, like when they do the plane, we were showing where the plane was flying. It was flying around Weaver's Needle, Needle Basin, Needle Canyon, in that area. Never at any time did they ever seem to be in the newspaper focused on West Boulder Canyon, which I've stated all my thoughts on that and what I'd heard from Tom about it. So I wondered if there was a narrative to tell a story to keep people out of the area or what it was. or what the whole deal was. But yes, there was something about that was very strange. Because I've seen letters, I've seen stuff, and it just doesn't mention West Boulder specifically at all. And I found it always odd that there's just that one picture that's at a nondescriptive area, could be any place in the mountains, and there's a white sheet up on the side of the hill. And that's the only picture we have prior to the skull being found. Well, there's a few of Barkley and Adams going in the mountains where they take pictures of them just before they leave with the dogs to go search. But I always wondered if those pictures were from December when they were doing the return search. But yeah, it's a very odd story. It opens itself up way too much for opinions. And that's what I think the bigger problem of the Adolf Ruth story was. And then, of course, if you're Irwin and you kind of even have the inkling that somebody might have killed your dad, there's going to be constantly, as people tell you things, you're going to think more and more of those things and think, oh, man, someone did Dad in, oh, man. And then you're probably going to come up with stuff. So there you go. So Jim Bark was alive when Ruth died, but he lived in California. I don't know where Ely was. I'm sure Ely was back east by that point too as well. So they were out of there. Bark did come back and visit at times, just come out visit and with his nephew John Spangler, and then he would visit with Barkley. And sure, he told him whatever he wanted to tell him. There's letters. I mean, I'll have to look. I didn't see the Barkley letters. I saw letters there's letters between the Ruths and Barkley. In that, the Ruths send the Barkleys maps that they had that they thought might help find Adolf Ruth. Yeah, surprise on that. As far as anything specific, they wouldn't have the Jim Bark stuff that I know of. I didn't see anything from Jim Bark. I know he visited. Most of the correspondence we have is between Jim Bark, Sims Ely, and they talk about Barkley and all that stuff a bit. And then Irwin Ruth, who was writing Sims Ely and Jim Bark, and they talk a little about Barkley in that. But it sounds like Jim Bark was writing Barkley, or could have been calling him, and was talking to Barkley, but Barkley wasn't getting back. Now, it could have been Barkley was busy with cattle, and he was also busy searching for Ruth at one point. But, yeah, those letters, a lot of that material is available at ASU in the Hayden Library. It's under the Sims Ely, Northcutt Ely Sims Ely material. But all those letters, the Greg Davis collection has them. I have a bunch of it. And it's interesting but they're on the outside of it, not there, talking about the situation. And at that point, Irwin's very convinced there's murders on the loose and stuff, and that's what he's into. All I know is everyone that was connected into the families to the man, I never heard anyone say they felt or suspected that. Now, someone will say, I don't know who was it. Was it Jack Sanfelice said, oh yeah, Jeff Adams suspected Barkley. I never saw that, never saw anything mentioned, never saw a letter or any piece of information goes that way. I think people got carried away because what I always found was the people that knew the families and stuff were like, no, that wouldn't have been, they didn't have anything to do with that. And then, of course, there's the other side. I don't know if I have to reread the books, all of them, because they're a bit confusing on the different finger pointing they do. But the whole Frazier thing and all that, and Abe Reed thing with Ruth, which is ridiculous. But there you're involving, Cox and Milton Rose and people like that who had a difficult time telling the truth. That was a person definitely we talked about, Greg Davis and I talked about yesterday, was, not yesterday, the day before yesterday. 2 days ago. We talked this week about him. Was Milton Rose never let a good story get in the way of the truth. So, especially when it came to the Lost Dutchman or the Superstition Mountains. So, Milton Rose once claimed he killed Ruth. And he told Greg Davis this, leaned in and told him very carefully, I killed Ruth. Milton Rose didn't kill Adolph Ruth. So, but, hey, it was a cool moment for Greg. I don't know if he got it on tape. That'd be cool. I have to go through and listen for the Milton Rose tapes. See if you get Milton on there on tape saying that. That'd be one, huh? That'd be an interview to play. But, again, when you look at that stuff, a lot of guys just didn't want to talk about it anymore because they felt it had just been run through the ringer. And the problem is with a story like that is the more people talk, the more... And just think about it. If you just go stand alone, the newspaper articles, they say he's missing. They're wondering if he could have been murdered. He could have been foul play. And then by the end of the articles, they basically say they've determined he's died of natural causes. It was agreed by Maricopa and Pinal County Sheriff's Department, who jointly were involved in this because it was right next to the county line. And they deferred to each other in all this, but all parties came to the conclusion that he died of natural causes, and they explained it all, and then that would be the end. But then you have Barry Storm and things like that, and then it just kept winding and winding. Now today you have conspiracy theories and everything else involved in it. So if you just read the book would be nice. I guess if you compiled it, put it together, went through all the trouble for it, you're not doing it. You're doing it to put the presentation, the story together. You're not doing it to make $1 or prove a point, which I don't care if someone wants to believe that Adolph Ruth was murdered by pick a person, and that's the whole thing, and he really did find the mine and all that. Once it's kind of like stone maps and other things. Once someone's made their mind up about that, you literally can't prove it different. So until they've convinced themselves there isn't a Bigfoot, there is no flying saucers, there is no ghost, they will continue to believe in it. So you can't take a person that believes in something and make them not believe in it, just showing them evidence, and because they will not listen to you. But they will look at the presentation and evidence, and eventually it'll sink in, and then there'll be something triggers, and then they go the other way. And I know this for a fact because I am one of those people that's run into that, where I went, duh, and suddenly realized, why was I missing all this the whole time? Not that anybody was telling me different, but what the hell was I thinking? And that happens a lot in life. And I know a few people that are going through some of those similar things, not necessarily in Dutch hunting, but with different things. And it's interesting to watch. That's what I told Trevor. One of his dissertations should be on for his doctorate. I know it's psychology. I know he would rather not have anything to do with the Superstition Mountains, but I still think the psychology of how that stuff works with people is very interesting. People will believe the most ridiculous thing that has literally no evidence or supporting documentation of anything supporting it, just because they hear it and they feel, oh, this has to be it. And then they can work themselves up and work evidence up for such a thing that doesn't exist. So when you really go through that stuff with Adolph Ruth, you really kind of go, wow, how did I come to any other conclusion than this? Don't know. They pack the body across. I mean, when you go back and look at stuff that people write, you go, this is silly. So, I heard a rumor. Trash, and that he got rid of it because he was afraid people accused him of killing Ruth. I never heard that. He had shotguns. Could have killed him with a shotgun. There was no bullet holes in Adolph Ruth's body. They said initially with the skull that there was possibility that it was he had been murdered and shot. That was in the newspapers, and then it was determined that both holes were intruding, and that was probably from rocks or animals or so forth. And of course he was very old, his bones were very probably fragile, and that was probably the case. That was the determination. But once you put out that's a bullet hole. And remember, it was for a long, long time. We only had the one picture of the one side. So everybody was just... And then I remember on one of the forums, people were literally trying to explain, well, this is a 45, this is a 38, it was a slug shotgun. And they came up with all these stories and stuff. And then there was a problem with certain parts of the skull or pieces of things or whatever were intact. Because I think his dentures are there and different things. And it was like, I don't know. So, but I never heard that Herman had a 45 revolver. I thought he had 2 shotguns. He had 2 shotguns, and one of them was the shotgun that Reinhardt had shot himself with. He took that home after the funeral, and he had Reinhardt's single-barrel shotgun in his home when Herman died, and that's what I heard. I'd never heard anything other than that. The Martins would have known what kind of guns he had or what he had. But that's that thing, is like everybody would talk about stuff and rumors and different things, and then it would just get carried away. And here's the thing. So-and-so was out digging around Herman's, and he was digging under the foundation and in the area because he knew Herman had a 45 that he had shot Ruth with, and we figured if we could dig up and find that revolver, then we'd have proof that Herman had shot Ruth and that he had buried the gun nearby his cabin out there in Queen Creek, along Queen Creek. Now, maybe so-and-so never searched for it. Maybe so-and-so just believed it and talked about going search for it, and then that story develops to an all-out search, and I wonder if those guys ever found it. And then people still go out, would dig things up, looking for something that didn't maybe even exist because someone talked about someone else who believed something, and that happens a lot. So you gotta be careful with those things, because you can go down like 3-4 rabbit holes, and then, like I said, wake up one day and look back and go, how the hell did I get here? What was the evidence, the actual evidence that made me think this? Which is always funny to me, because I have close friends that believe in the stone maps, and I'll listen to them to some degree. I used to be very, very patient and listen to hours of stone map discussion. I've changed. There's so much where I say I gotta step out. I spent 4 or 5 hours on the phone with Brad Cooper once, talking about the stone maps and Keno and mission bells and all kinds of stuff. I had no idea what he was talking about. Brad and I, great guy. I liked Brad. I did not know what he was even talking about at one point. I was just, smoking cigarettes, getting something to drink, and just letting Brad talk. Figuring I'd keep some of it. I kept very little of it because I had no idea where he was going with any of this. But I had that patience. Later, I started to lose the patience because I just couldn't grasp any of it anymore. The more I found out about Travis Tomlinson, more I found out about various things involving him, I realized I don't even know why anybody's biting on this anymore. The first time I ever saw anything with the stone maps, because I was too young to watch Life magazine or see the Life magazine, the first time I ever heard of the stone maps is when I picked up Sikorsky's book, and the pictures are there. And I looked at them and said, I started laughing. I was a kid, and I was going, what the hell is this stuff? And I was like, that's the most ridiculous stuff I ever saw. And then I went down, and I think at that time they might have been at the not the Superstition Museum, they were at the Mineral Museum. And I went and saw them, and when I saw them, I just, again, so, didn't Clay say he didn't really believe the official story of Ruth? I will say this, and I liked Clay, and I spent plenty of time with Clay. Clay, on the record, off the record with people, and then there was other deeper versions of Clay. And there were things Clay said, because Clay was very nice. We had a discussion one day about someone that he had issues with. The other person had issues with Clay for whatever reason. Clay honestly said he didn't know why. The other person had told me why. I didn't really, and I thought it was kind of nitpicking. Everybody has their dark side at one point. And Clay didn't have a mean bone in his body about this whole issue of someone that entirely screwed him over big time. Happened several times in his life. He was a very, very nice man, and I would have discussions about that. You're so nice about stuff to people. Why? And it's a similar thing that Shoes has told me. Ron's pretty nice. Ron Feldman would say he's not like that, but he is. These guys believe in their hearts so much, and you can see it in their eyes, because all they do is get angry with you when you try to straighten them out. It's best to try to go with the flow with them, to find an easy way to be non-committal and listen to them. Just listen to them out. And because Shoes, I know, with several people, and they still are searching for their version of the Dutchman, would try to tell them, you need to do something with yourself. This is an obsession now. It's not even a passion. It's not that it costs you money. That's not the idea. It's eating you up alive inside. And hey, Larry. And when it's eating you up inside, making you not sleep, and it's driving you crazy, it's an obsession, and it's an internal thing, and it's bad. And Shoes has talked to some people. Howdy had internet issues today. Well, it records, so you can always find it on YouTube. So it's slower loading from the other ones. These ones I can post to Facebook on links within that half hour. I don't know why that is. So Clay and all these guys would say different things about different things. Tom could be much more open if he knew he wasn't going to hurt your feelings at all, and you just were like, and Clay could be that way, but it wasn't that often, because Clay was very careful. He just didn't really, I don't think he didn't want to rock the boat. He didn't want to cause problems with anybody. It was very nice. I knew there were people he saw through, and he didn't say anything because he thought they were nice people, and he thought inside, regardless of this thing, they were still maybe a good person. I don't know. And in some cases he was very wrong about the person because he really didn't know them. But that's who he was. He was very, very nice to everybody. And he would agree with almost everyone. Shoes might not agree, but he was very, very nice to people. But I think it wears on you at a point where people start thinking, oh, he wasn't nice to my friend who believes this. And it's like, well, he's heard 1,001. He's probably heard what your friend said 50 times. And people have, and I've seen this before, people will sit down, and they don't do it with me, trust me. But I've seen people sit with Clay or Shoes. And Clay, fortunately, got to a point where, people would go to his house and he'd just let them in and sit there and talk to them. But I've seen it with Shoes. Ron won't tolerate it pretty much. He'll listen to his extent, and then he'll just find an excuse to get up and leave. I've seen them sit there and literally just be so done with the conversation, but they don't know how to be rude and break away. Shoes will actually start turning. If I'm there, I've had him turn to start talking to me and go, who are these guys? What's going on here? Why do they just keep going on and on? I don't even know them. I'm not even following them anymore. I don't care. So these guys were very, very nice. So I would never have posted anything that any of them said privately in difference. Now, I am a little different because I will usually try to cut to the chase and say something. And I'm sure a few people here maybe have heard that from me, where I'll just tell you what I think of something. Say, I don't mind. I'll read your book. I'll buy your book. I'm not going to spend extreme amount of time on something that is flawed from documentation, though. So if, someone's sitting there and telling me something, I'm like, no, this just proves that out. That is not true. And then if they want to just and fall apart because of this, fine. And I had that with someone where I said, everything you just told me is in a book. And someone else wrote it 40 years ago. So why don't you go read that book? Because I don't think everybody's doesn't believe you. They just didn't believe him, and it sounds like you just took it from his book. And they were having a problem, and I couldn't get them to understand it's not you personally. They've heard this before. Someone else followed exactly the same thing you're doing, and you have a problem with everyone not believing you, but everybody allowed you to say your piece, and you will just keep pounding it on people, because unless they believe you, blah, 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 and then people get rude and they get messed up. Jason Fritz was really, really nice at the rendezvous. I give Jason a ton of credit, because Jason said, you don't have to believe me. I hope I can ever someday come here with real proof. If not, thank you for hearing me out, blah, blah, blah. Jason admitted, I could be completely wrong, but I think I'm right. But I hope someday to be able to prove this to you and give you more better evidence and all that. That's the way to go about it. But people are... And then people just pound it into the ground, and they start posting videos and talking about things they had known nothing about. There are people that are chasing shit in the mountains, and one of the most ridiculous things... I'm trying to read a note. I don't even know who that was. All right, so... I think I'll be wrapping up soon. I don't know why I have a note. Okay, I think I know what it says, but I don't know. Okay. So anyways, we'll wrap up a few more minutes here. But Clay's interviews are awesome. Was it ever assumed that Waltz's gold came from his I don't think he had a California claim. He worked on claims for others in California. I think we just know, the only claims we know of that he really necessarily had claims on were the Prescott Bradshaw claims. So that's the only ones we have any evidence or anything of. Okay, so anyways, so there we go. So I don't know if he might have had some samples or some gold he brought from his California claims. Who knows? But yeah, we don't know really. That gold, Julia, Reinhardt, Godfrey. There's some of that was discussed. I'm trying to remember who talked about that. Was it in? Whose material was that about? They had some samples from different places that he'd been, and Gottfried or Reinhardt had some of that, and nobody knew whatever happened to it, because it would give you more of a fingerprint of an idea, mineral based, of where some of it came from. But it was some samples of ore from his house they were able to recover at Waltz's direction. So they knew what it was. They knew it wasn't the Lost Dutchman stuff. They knew it was, and it was. And I think the stories get confused because of that. Not just, okay, that isn't the Lost Dutchman ore had. Those were samples of ore from various places, which we all do. We collect samples of ore from different places. So we see comparatively, look at the mineralogy. We put them in our yards and stuff, or on bookshelves, and collect them. So Waltz had something like that with some sample pieces. So, but I'm trying to remember where that story is listed in, whether it was in the Sims Ely, Northcutt Ely stuff, if it was in who it was that talked about it. But I don't think it was Herman. I think it came from Herman. I think it was either Reinhardt or Godfrey, and it might have been Reinhardt or Godfrey. One of them ended up with it. Was the Coachella ore ever traced to the Superstitions? Well, it was found in the Superstitions. How would it not be traced? Okay, it comes from an unknown mine. It does not have a known mine attached to it. So when they look at it, it doesn't come from any known mine. So it's from an unknown mine. And John found it in the Superstition Mountains in a saddlebag under a bush. So chances are it came from the Superstitions, from a mine somewhere in the Superstitions. So that's another story. I don't think the story... I thought, God, didn't Ron tell that story? maybe he didn't. That's a story that doesn't get told as much because it was John and his brother. And I've talked to the family and stuff about that stuff. But a very, very interesting story about someone that got a story that chased something and didn't find what he was looking for, but did pretty good finding something else, but which got him off track onto something else. So, and Ron knows that story inside out. And I'm thinking, I don't think Ron's ever, I think he tells that story, or talks about the story, but I don't think he ever really wrote in depth about the story. Which is unfortunate. Yeah, John Cochera was a good guy, and his family's still out there. They don't know a ton about it as much as Ron probably knows, because Ron knew him really well, and they went in the mountains. But, yeah, the John Cochera ore was found in the Superstitions, and Ron had the remaining pieces that John did not sell, and John had it tested, and Ron did, and it comes from an unknown mine. So it's not from any mine, the mineralization ties, but it does come from the similar activity, mineral activity of the Superstition. So it is probably Superstition or 97% or something. And yes, it was found in there. So it's a good story. Maybe I need to pull that file out because I got a lot of that stuff on that. I gotta find the Cochera's picture too. I'll finish with this. So I'm at Greg's one day, and I'm going through files. And what I used to do sometimes is go over, find what I'm looking at, and then I would sit on the floor or get a chair. And anybody that's been there knows it's just a mass of all stuff, aisles of file cabinets and boxes. And so I'm just sitting there, and I would just start going from the beginning of a cabinet file drawer to the back and pull out each file and look through it and see what was in it. I did it randomly. I never did like A through Z because I'd never make it. But I would just be like, today I'll start here. And I don't know what I was going through. And I pulled out a file, and I was going through it, and there was an envelope. And sometimes you open an envelope, it's a receipt, sometimes it's some negatives, sometimes this. And I pulled it out, and there was some photos in there, and I pulled them out, and they were of John Cochera in the Superstitions, the one that you see in books, one of them, with the bandana around his head and no shirt on. And the negatives were in there. And I said, this is... And I put them back in. The white envelope had nothing written on it. Put it back in the file, went through it. Don't think anything else in there had anything to do with Cochera. I was like, And then I put it back and kept going. About 5 or 6 months later, I was talking to Greg, and I said, hey, I was wondering, other than, I don't know if Ron has any, but are there really any pictures of Cochera in the mountain, John Cochera, other than that one? And Greg said, no. And he said, I've been looking for that photo, the negative, for it to make copies of it forever. And I said, I found it. And Greg said, where? And I pointed down the aisle. And I said, it's down there. And he said, what cabinet? And I said, I got no idea, Greg. And I've, for years now, for about 8 or 9 years, I've been opening cabinets and just trying to see if something will click. I have a great memory. And for some reason that day, because you got to understand, when I'm there, Randy might be there. So if Randy's there and he's looking over here and he's talking to me across the room, and Greg's over here and he's talking to me, or maybe Dan Hopper's there. So you're having conversations, going through cabinets, pulling stuff out, looking at things. When you find something you've never seen before, you're taking a picture of it, putting it back, and da-da-da. Okay, so there's so much going on, and you might be writing notes over here. Because a lot of times the material I'm going to look at and review and reference later is when I get away from there. So I didn't pay any attention, keep track of anything. And it's just so weird that Greg brought that up. And then I was like, oh, Greg, yep, I saw it. And Greg was like, where? And I said, it's in a white envelope. He said, yes. And I said, it's with the other Cochera pictures that you printed, and there's the negatives with it. And he said, negatives? And I said, yeah, there's several negatives. I didn't look at the negatives. I just looked at the pictures, put it all back. I put it back in the file like you tell me to, and I put it right back and everything. And okay, where was that? And I kept trying to think of where I was, and I've never been able to find it again. So it's in there, but that's what happens to stuff. It's there, and you never see it again. Randy had such a thing with some of Walt Gassler's mining claim papers. And he sent me an email with that stuff in it of the claim papers, and I was looking at them, and I didn't save the emails because Randy had copies, and then Randy doesn't know what happened to the copies, which showed specific areas of certain claims and certain things that we wanted to follow up on, and whatever he did that day down at Pinal or in Florence when he looked at the archives on microfiche was out of order, and he just got lucky to see what he did and copy it, and that was the case, but he doesn't know what he was looking for that day, so we never knew how to find those files again, and he lost the original files. So that happens a lot, unfortunately. So we're going to get out of here. I have a note of something. All right, so I'm going to go see what the note's about and see what kind of trouble I've caused or mischief in the world. I hope everybody had great Christmas. Merry Christmas. Everybody has great holidays, is safe this New Year's Eve, so we see you again the next time. Catch Chasing Legends on Monday. Catch us on another live, I believe next Friday, because Discovery Camp is not starting just yet, because that's where it gets rough, where I got to make it back and do this after Discovery Camp. But we will be running into that time of the season here within the next month or so. So, wow, time flies. Didn't need to take up all your time. Thanks for all the information. Nah. We always got plenty of time. Every week, bring it up again. I'm going to look it up, and if I can find some better, other accurate information that's interesting, that's cool. There's always great stories about that stuff. Have a great, safe, Merry Christmas to you and your family. And gonna rewatch. Yeah, have to rewatch. Always go through. Catch me, and remind me of things. But anyways, everybody have a great rest of the week. I got to figure out how to get out of this. All right, I figured it out. But everybody have a great rest of the week, and we will see you. Is it going to be next year? The next time we join up here for Chasing Legends? Yes, I will see all of you next year. Have a happy new year, and good night.